A lone boy runs through dimly lit streets holding a bundle of bread wrapped in a torn newspaper. His shoes splash through puddles, but he never stops. In a city where power decides who gets to dream, one boy learned that strength isn't found in what you take, but in what you give. Cut to a small leaking shelter, children sleeping under patched blankets. The boy, soaked and breathless, quietly places the bread on the table beside a flickering lamp. His name is Eli Romano, 17, honest to a fault, and willing to work any job to make sure others don't go hungry. A door creaks. A friend whispers, "Eli, you haven't eaten again." He smiles faintly and shakes his head. "Let them eat first," he replies. He had no family, no fortune, but a heart too rich to sell. Hello, Moonlight family. Welcome back to Moonlight Romance Stories. If you're new here, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic stories filled with betrayal, power, and transformation. And to all my loyal viewers, thank you for always lighting up the moonlit world with your support. That night, the storm refused to end. The city lights blurred beneath the downpour as Eli hurried across the narrow streets of Old Varese, his jacket clinging to his skin. He'd just finished cleaning tables at a diner, his third job that week, and every coin he earned already had a purpose. Food for the kids, medicine for little Rosa, and maybe, if luck allowed, a new bulb for the shelter's broken lamp. He passed by a group of men under a street awning. Their laughter was sharp, unsettling. Ahead, an elderly man struggled with an umbrella, his wallet slipping from his coat pocket. In an instant, one of the men snatched it. Eli's instincts took over. "Hey!" he shouted, sprinting forward. The thieves scattered, but Eli caught the nearest one, snatching the wallet back before they vanished into the rain. The old man stared in shock, then gratitude. "You didn't have to risk yourself, boy." Eli wiped the rain from his brow. "You looked like you needed help. That's reason enough." A faint smile crossed the man's lips. Most people would have walked away. "Maybe," Eli replied. "But then what would that make me?" The man studied him for a long moment, the kind of gaze that measures more than words reveal. "You remind me of someone I used to be." As thunder rumbled again, the man extended his hand. "Matteo DeLuca," he said. "Come, let's get you dry, and maybe something better than street bread for dinner." Eli hesitated but nodded. Something about the man felt genuine, though his name carried quiet weight. The kind of name people whispered in both respect and fear. Moments later, as they entered a quiet corner restaurant, a black car slowed at the curb. A shadow inside lifted a phone. "He's found a new stray," the voice said. Just like before. Inside, laughter and warmth replaced the storm, until Matteo suddenly clutched his chest, eyes wide. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Sir?" Eli shouted, rushing forward. Outside, sirens wailed through the rain. Eli kneels beside Matteo as the lights flicker, unaware that this night, the night he refused to walk away, would change his destiny forever. "Help! Somebody help!" Eli's voice echoed through the vast halls of the villa as he held the old man upright. Within moments, attendants rushed in, panic flashing across their faces. One of them grabbed the phone, shouting for an ambulance, while Eli stayed by Matteo's side, whispering, "Stay with me, sir, just breathe." The ride to the hospital blurred into a haze of flashing lights and sirens. Eli sat quietly in the corner, soaked from the rain, hands trembling as he watched the man who'd been a stranger just hours ago struggle for life. When dawn broke, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. Matteo DeLuca rested in a private hospital room, pale but conscious. The moment he saw Eli at the door, he smiled faintly. "You stayed," he murmured. Eli nodded. "You asked me to help. I couldn't just walk away." The old man studied him with weary eyes. "You remind me of the man I once hoped to become. Honest, steady." A faint cough escaped him before he added, "There's something I must do before I go." He reached for the bedside drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope stamped with a golden insignia. "When the time is right, open this," Matteo said softly. "Until then, promise me one thing. Keep your integrity, even when the world offers you gold to lose it." Eli frowned, confused. "You're going to be fine. You'll tell me yourself when to open it." Matteo's smile trembled. If only time listened to good hearts. He rested back, eyes fluttering closed. The monitors beeped steadily, but his breathing grew slower, calmer. Eli sat by his side for hours until visiting time ended, refusing to leave. The next morning, a nurse found Eli asleep in the hallway chair, the sealed letter clutched in his hand. Matteo had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Days later, Eli returned to the orphanage carrying a quiet heaviness in his chest. He finally broke the seal on the letter, expecting words of gratitude. But inside was an official document, a legal will. It read, "I, Matteo DeLuca, hereby name Eli Romano as caretaker of the DeLuca Foundation, with full authority to oversee its charitable work and outstanding accounts." Eli's breath caught. "Caretaker?" He flipped the page. Attached was a financial statement, one that made his stomach twist. The foundation was buried under millions in debt. Why would Matteo trust him, a 17-year-old boy with such a burden? Before he could think further, a black car stopped in front of the shelter. 3 men in suits stepped out. Polite smiles, polished shoes, and unreadable eyes. "You're Eli Romano?" the eldest asked. "Yes," Eli answered cautiously. The man nodded, lowering his voice. "We worked with Mr. DeLuca. Word travels fast, and trust me, kid. You don't want to carry his debts. Walk away. For your own good." The car door closed, leaving Eli standing on the curb, the sealed will pressed to his chest as the words echoed in his mind. That night, Eli unfolded the letter again. Beneath Matteo's signature, he noticed faint writing that hadn't been visible before. Ink smudged like it was added in haste. It read, "If they come to you, don't fear them. The truth they hide is your real inheritance." Eli stared at the fading ink beneath Matteo's signature. "If they come to you, don't fear them. The truth they hide is your real inheritance." The words pulsed in his mind like a heartbeat. What truth? What inheritance? Days later, Eli was summoned to the DeLuca Foundation headquarters, a towering glass building that seemed to look down on the city like a silent judge. His plain shirt and worn shoes stood out among the polished marble floors and tailored suits. The receptionist, after a long pause, offered a hesitant smile. "You're Mr. Romano? The new acting caretaker?" Eli nodded, clutching Matteo's letter like a lifeline. The boardroom was filled with whispers. Some faces looked confused, others irritated. The foundation's executives murmured among themselves, a boy running the legacy of Matteo DeLuca. It sounded absurd. Then a calm voice broke through. "Give him space." A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward. His expression was steady but kind. "I'm Luca Ferro, Matteo's personal assistant. I've been with him for 20 years. Eli recognized the sincerity in his eyes and relaxed slightly. "Did you know about this appointment?" Luca shook his head. "No, but Matteo was deliberate in everything he did. If he chose you, there's a reason." They spent the afternoon touring the building. Luca explained the foundation's purpose: charities, educational programs, hospitals Matteo had funded across the city. But each department had one thing in common: debts, unpaid grants, missing funds, and quiet silences when Eli asked too many questions. At the archives, Luca pulled out boxes of old reports. "Something doesn't add up," he muttered. The foundation wasn't failing until 2 years ago. Then suddenly, millions disappeared and every account started bleeding. Eli frowned. "You think someone inside caused it?" Luca gave him a knowing look. "In this world, money doesn't vanish. It changes hands." That night, Eli sat alone in Matteo's former office. The rain returned, tapping gently on the window. He looked around. The photos, the books, the half-empty shelves. Every inch of the room seemed to whisper a story. On Matteo's desk lay a locked drawer. Curiosity tugged at him. Using a small pin, he carefully jiggled it open. Inside, a few personal letters, a photo of Matteo with a younger Luca, and one folded sheet of paper with familiar handwriting. Eli unfolded it with trembling hands. The words were short, written in Matteo's deliberate script. Trust no one inside the board. Eli froze, reading the line over and over. A chill ran through him. He turned toward the window. The city lights glittered below, and somewhere out there, people were already plotting the future of the DeLuca Foundation. The door creaked open behind him. Luca's voice was calm, but his tone carried a shadow of concern. You shouldn't stay here so late, Eli. Some people might not like that you're asking too many questions. Eli folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. Maybe that's exactly why I should stay. Luca hesitated, then smiled faintly. Matteo would have liked you. As Luca left, Eli turned back to Matteo's desk, only to notice something strange. The photo frame that had been upright minutes ago now lay face down, and beneath it, barely visible in the reflection of the glass, were 3 words scratched faintly into the wood. They already know. Morning light spilled through the glass walls of the DeLuca Foundation's boardroom, washing everything in gold, yet the atmosphere was anything but warm. Eli Romano sat quietly at the end of the long marble table, a young figure surrounded by sharp suits and colder smiles. This was his first official board meeting, and every pair of eyes in the room seemed to ask the same silent question. What is a boy doing here? At the head of the table sat Vince Caravelli, a charismatic man in his 40s with perfect posture and a smile too polished to trust. He was the Foundation's chief business strategist and, as Luca had warned, the one who'd taken over much of Matteo's estate after his passing. Welcome, Mr. Romano, Vince said smoothly, his tone soaked in charm. We all admire your enthusiasm, but as you'll soon see, enthusiasm doesn't pay debts. Eli nodded politely. I came to listen and learn, Mr. Caravelli. The meeting began with figures projected on sleek screens, numbers read as warning lights, losses, unpaid loans, overdue commitments. Every sentence ended with one word: debt. Finally, Vince leaned back. Our solution is simple. We liquidate low-performing branches. The orphan shelters and learning centers are draining our resources. Sell them, and the Foundation survives. A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Eli's head shot up. Those shelters are the heart of the Foundation. They were Matteo DeLuca's first project. Vince smiled thinly. He also built skyscrapers and businesses, yet those didn't beg for handouts. We must be practical, not sentimental. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for Eli to fold under pressure. Instead, he rose to his feet, voice calm but firm. Practicality shouldn't mean abandoning people who believed in us. Matteo didn't build this to save money. He built it to save lives. Luca glanced up, pride flickering in his eyes. But Vince's expression never changed. Idealism, he said softly, is a luxury the broke can't afford. Eli met his gaze. Then maybe the problem isn't the shelters. Maybe it's the people running the numbers. A heavy silence dropped over the room. Someone coughed. The moment stretched, uncomfortable, electric. Vince's smile never faltered, but his voice cooled. I admire your passion, Mr. Romano, truly, but you'll learn soon enough. This world doesn't reward honesty. It devours it. The meeting adjourned in uneasy quiet. As Eli walked out, Luca whispered, You just made your first enemy. That afternoon, Eli returned to the shelter to check on the children, hoping for peace. But instead, chaos awaited him. Reporters were crowded outside, microphones flashing, voices overlapping. Eli Romano, care to comment on the accusations? Is it true you're embezzling Foundation funds? Are you planning to close orphan shelters for personal gain? Eli froze, eyes wide. Someone had twisted his words, fast. A breaking news banner glowed on a journalist's phone screen. Teen caretaker accused of greed. DeLuca Foundation in turmoil. Luca arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd. Don't say a word, he murmured urgently. They're setting you up. Eli looked toward the cameras, his reflection caught in 100 lenses, a symbol of scandal he hadn't caused. Later that night, scrolling through the headlines in disbelief, Eli noticed one photo taken from inside the boardroom, a private meeting no one else had access to. Someone on the inside was feeding the press. And in the comments beneath the article, a strange new username had posted just 6 words. Matteo warned you about the board. The morning papers were merciless. Teen caretaker under fire. Eli Romano, a fraud in Matteo's shadow? Every headline painted him as greedy, reckless, or worse. A child who inherited a kingdom he couldn't rule. At the shelter, donations vanished almost overnight. The once bustling pantry shelves stood half empty, and the power company threatened disconnection. Eli sat at the old wooden desk, surrounded by unpaid bills, feeling the weight of Matteo's words pressing on his heart. Keep your integrity even when the world offers you gold to lose it. Sister Rosa entered quietly, her face lined with worry. The landlord called again. He says if we can't pay this month, we'll have to leave. Eli took a deep breath. Then we'll find another way. Eli, the city's already turned against you, she said softly. Sometimes, even truth can't shout louder than lies. But Eli refused to bend. Then I'll stop shouting and start showing. That night he printed flyers by hand, walked the streets and knocked on doors. He spoke to anyone who would listen, about Matteo's dream, the children who still needed care, and the good that could be done if people stood together. At first most doors closed in his face, but a few opened. A shopkeeper offered free bread, a retired teacher volunteered to tutor the kids, a street musician donated his weekend earnings. Slowly, whispers of scandal began to shift into murmurs of respect. One afternoon, a local journalist visited the shelter, a woman named Clara Moretti, known for uncovering truth in the noise. She watched Eli serve food to the children and asked, "Why not step down and let the foundation handle the debt?" Eli smiled faintly. "Because the foundation isn't a building. It's the people Matteo helped. If I walk away, I betray him. And them." Her story ran the next day under a different headline. The boy who wouldn't sell out. Donations trickled back in. Volunteers began to return. The shelter buzzed with renewed energy, a beacon of hope in a city that had turned cold. But with every step forward, new shadows stirred behind the scenes. Late one evening, as Eli locked the shelter doors, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. The message was short, just one line. Not everything Matteo owned was clean. Eli froze, staring at the words. His pulse quickened. Was this another attempt to discredit him? Or the beginning of a truth Matteo had tried to hide? He showed the message to Luca the next morning. Luca frowned deeply. "That's not a threat," he said quietly. "That's a warning." Eli looked out the window toward the city skyline, Matteo's ring glinting faintly on his finger. "Then maybe it's time," he whispered, "to learn what kind of world Matteo left behind." As Eli turned back to his desk, an envelope had been slipped under the door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Matteo DeLuca shaking hands with a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out in ink. Beneath it, one cryptic note. "Find him and you'll find the truth." Episode 6. Secrets in the Ledger. The photograph haunted Eli all night. The scratched out face, the note, "Find him and you'll find the truth." But answers rarely came from the obvious. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through Matteo's dusty office, Eli decided to revisit the one place he hadn't fully explored, Matteo's private study. It still smelled faintly of sandalwood and old books, like time itself refused to move on. He searched through drawers, cabinets, even behind the portraits until his fingers brushed against something solid beneath the desk. A false panel clicked open, revealing a small leather-bound notebook, its pages aged but meticulously organized. The title written on the first page made him pause, Debts of Honor. But as he flipped through the entries, confusion turned to astonishment. These weren't financial records. Each line was a story, a name, a date, and a description of someone Matteo had helped. A widow whose rent he paid for 3 years. A student whose scholarship came from anonymous donors. A small bakery he saved from bankruptcy. Eli whispered, "These are people Matteo owed gratitude to, not money." Every promise, every act of quiet generosity was listed, along with notes in Matteo's neat handwriting. "Repay in kindness when I'm gone." Tears welled in Eli's eyes. Matteo's debts weren't his downfall, they were his legacy. Luca entered quietly and froze at the sight of the ledger. "He told me about this once," he said softly. "Said he didn't believe in charity, only responsibility." Eli closed the book reverently. "Then that's what we'll do. Repay every one of these debts, not with money, but with action." Luca hesitated. "Eli, that could take years." Eli smiled faintly. "Then we'd better start now." And so they did. Over the following weeks, Eli and the volunteers began reaching out to the names in the ledger. They repaired old roofs, restocked empty shops, visited the sick, and sponsored students who'd lost hope. Slowly, the community that had turned against him began to see him differently, not as a scandal, but as a boy carrying a promise bigger than himself. Local papers began calling it the DeLuca Redemption Project. Donations started flowing again, but this time not from elites, from ordinary people. Matteo's debts were being repaid by kindness rippling outward, yet not everyone celebrated. One evening, as Eli packed up after another outreach event, a black SUV pulled up beside him. A man in a gray coat stepped out, tall, composed, his smile thin. "You must be Eli Romano," he said smoothly. "I was once Matteo's partner." Eli nodded cautiously. "Then you knew the kind of man he was." "Oh, I knew him well," the man replied. "Better than you ever will." He handed Eli a folded paper. "If you keep digging into his affairs, I'll have no choice but to release what I know. Dark truths that would destroy his name, and yours with it." Eli's hands trembled as he unfolded the note. But before he could speak, the man was already walking away, his words hanging like fog in the air. "Stop repaying his debts," he said over his shoulder. "You have no idea what you're waking up." Eli opened the folded paper under the streetlight. It wasn't a threat, but a copy of an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "DeLuca Foundation linked to secret project. Investigation sealed." And scribbled across the bottom in the same ink Matteo used for his ledger were 5 chilling words. He knew they'd come back. The newspaper clipping wouldn't leave Eli's mind. He knew they'd come back. What did it mean? Who were they? But there was no time for fear. The community project had grown beyond expectation. Food drives, medical aid, renovations, and people now spoke Matteo's name with warmth again. For the first time in weeks, hope felt tangible. Then the storm came. Early one morning, Luca burst into Eli's office holding a folder. "You need to see this," he said grimly. Inside were legal documents, stamped, notarized, and already halfway through approval. According to them, every outstanding debt of the DeLuca Foundation had been cleared. Eli frowned. "That's impossible. We've only repaid a fraction." "That's the point," Luca replied. "Someone's trying to make it look like you forged the records and like you falsified payment reports." Before Eli could respond, the phone rang. A calm, unfamiliar voice spoke. "Mr. Romano, I represent the Central Debt Council. We're aware of your foundation's miraculous progress. If you wish to keep your good name, come see me. I can make this situation disappear." When Eli arrived at the elegant office tower, he was greeted by a man in a gray suit, the same one who had handed him the newspaper clipping. His tone was polite, but every word carried a quiet threat. "I admire your idealism," the man said. "But in this world, sincerity doesn't pay bills. Sign these." He slid the documents across the table. "And your debts vanish. You'll save your orphanage, your reputation, everything Matteo built." Eli stared at the papers. One signature, and all his problems would evaporate. The faces of the children flashed through his mind, the tired smiles of the people he'd helped. Matteo's handwriting in the ledger, "Repay in kindness." He pushed the papers back. "No." The man's expression hardened. "Do you understand what you're refusing?" Eli rose calmly. "I do. Real freedom isn't bought by lies." For a long moment, the man said nothing. Then a faint, almost amused smile touched his lips. "Very well, Mr. Romano. You've chosen your path. Let's see where honesty gets you." The following week tested Eli's decision. Investigators arrived at his office, questioning his staff. Sponsors withdrew pledges. Rumors spread online that he'd embezzled funds. Even volunteers began doubting. Through it all, Eli stood firm. "We'll continue our work," he told them. "If truth costs us everything, then so be it." To everyone's surprise, that very stand drew unexpected support. Matteo's old accountant came forward, publicly confirming that the ledgers were real. A rival nonprofit director donated equipment saying, "We need people who still believe in integrity." Eli's calm defiance inspired even those who once opposed him. And amid the chaos, his small act of courage began to ripple again. One quiet truth standing against a sea of deception. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Luca rushed into the office with an envelope. "Eli," he said breathlessly, "you won't believe who sent this." The envelope bore a single embossed crest, the Caravelli family insignia. Inside was a handwritten note from Vince Caravelli himself. "You interest me, Mr. Romano. Let's talk. Privately." Eli looked up from the note, uneasy. Luca whispered, "Vince never meets anyone in person. If he wants you there, it's not just business." And for the first time, Eli wondered if the shadow over Matteo's debts wasn't about money at all, but something buried much deeper. The invitation felt heavier than paper, embossed with gold, scented faintly of cigar smoke and old money. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a summons. Vince Caravelli didn't invite people. He selected them. Eli arrived at the rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline, where the world below seemed smaller, quieter. Like morality didn't reach this high. Vince sat by the window, elegant and composed, the city lights reflected in his glass of wine. "Mr. Romano," Vince greeted smoothly, rising to shake his hand. "You've made quite the name for yourself. An honest boy fixing a dishonest world. That's rare and dangerous." Eli sat, cautious. "You asked to see me." Vince smiled. "Yes, because I see potential." Matteo once had the same fire in his eyes, the belief that sincerity could change men. But sincerity, he swirled his glass, doesn't pay bills or settle debts. "I'm not here for money," Eli said quietly. "That's exactly why I want you." Vince leaned forward. "You have what others lack, a reputation. People trust you. Work with me, and together we could rebuild what Matteo started. The difference is, this time it'll profit everyone involved. You'll have funding, power, and a seat at every table that matters. Join me, and you'll never struggle again." The words struck a chord. For a fleeting moment, Eli imagined what that could mean. The orphanage saved, every promise fulfilled, every sleepless night gone. But then Matteo's ledger flashed in his mind. Repay in kindness. He looked Vince in the eye. "I appreciate the offer, but I'd rather build something honest that lasts." Vince's smile didn't falter, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Honest, he repeated softly, as though tasting the word. You really believe honesty survives in this world? Eli nodded. If it doesn't, I'll make sure it does. For a heartbeat, silence lingered. Then Vince laughed, low and measured. You remind me of Matteo before the world taught him how it really works. He stood, straightening his cufflinks. But idealism is a fragile thing. Let's see how long yours survives. He signaled a waiter, who brought a velvet box. Inside was a golden pen. Ornate, expensive. A gift, Vince said. Use it when you're ready to sign something real. Eli closed the box carefully. I'll keep it as a reminder, not to. Vince's eyes narrowed, amused, yet calculating. We'll see. When Eli left, the night air felt heavier. Luca was waiting outside. So? He asked. Eli exhaled. He offered me the world. And you turned it down? Yes, Eli said, gazing at the lights below. But I think he's about to take it personally. Back inside the restaurant, Vince stood by the window, watching Eli disappear into the street below. His expression darkened as he picked up his phone. Begin the audit, he ordered quietly. If the boy wants honesty, let's see what happens when everything around him starts to fall apart. The next morning, Eli arrived at the foundation to find police vehicles parked outside. A reporter shouted, Mr. Romano, is it true your foundation's accounts are under investigation for fraud? Eli froze, the golden pen from Vince's gift glinting in his hand. The flashing cameras outside the foundation's gates blinded him like lightning. Questions cut through the air. Did you falsify reports? Are you hiding offshore accounts? Is the foundation collapsing? Eli kept his head high, refusing to answer. Silence sometimes was louder than defense. Inside, the staff was in chaos. Bank accounts were frozen, project funds blocked, even their charity permits placed under review. Every attempt to clear their name was buried under new accusations. It was too precise, too clean. A silent storm planned by someone who knew exactly where to strike. Vince Caravelli's influence was everywhere. At night, Eli sat in Matteo's old chair, surrounded by unpaid bills and fading hope. This is what he meant, he thought. Honesty under fire. Luca slammed a folder on the desk. He's cutting off your oxygen, Eli. Every partner, every sponsor, gone. If we don't act fast, we lose everything Matteo built. Eli rubbed his eyes, exhaustion creeping in. Then we build something he can't touch. That thought sparked something. The next morning, instead of wallowing, Eli went back to the one place he knew best, the orphanage. He gathered the older teens in the courtyard. I know what people are saying, he told them. But if we wait for someone to rescue us, we'll stay victims forever. Let's learn how to stand and work on our own. He began teaching them skills, carpentry, computer literacy, basic business principles. They repaired furniture, restored old houses, created small crafts to sell online. What started as survival turned into purpose. Within weeks, videos of their work began circulating online. The sight of young people led by a calm, determined orphan, rebuilding their future from scraps, captured hearts across the city. Donations trickled in again, not from corporations but from ordinary citizens. Reporters who once mocked Eli began calling him the boy who wouldn't break. His story went viral under a new hashtag. Honest hands. Even Luca, once cynical, looked at him with renewed faith. You turned disaster into a classroom, he said. Eli smiled faintly. That's what Matteo would have done. Teach them to fight with integrity, not violence. For a fleeting moment, it felt like light was winning again. But peace in Eli's world never lasted long. One evening, as they reviewed new donation pledges, Luca's phone buzzed. His face drained of color as he read the message. Eli, you need to see this. It was a leaked memo, stamped with the Caravelli Group's insignia. Confidential legal strategy subject. Full acquisition of DeLuca Foundation assets through court petition. Basis, mismanagement fraud. Status: filed, pending execution. Eli's breath caught. He's trying to take it all, legally. Luca nodded grimly. He's not sending rumors anymore. He's coming for the deed, the foundation, even the orphanage. Eli stood silent for a long time, the city lights flickering beyond the window. Then, with quiet resolve, he said, "Then we fight him in the light. With proof. With truth. No matter how long it takes." Outside, a courier arrived with an envelope addressed to Eli Romano, by order of the Caravelli Corporation. Inside was a single line typed in bold. "You have 7 days to vacate the premises." The 7-day notice sat like a silent clock on Eli's desk. Every tick of the second hand reminded him how little time they had left. The foundation's buildings, the orphanage, everything Matteo had left behind, all now dangled under Vince Caravelli's legal noose. But Eli wasn't ready to surrender. For days he combed through old ledgers, archived contracts, and every file Matteo had signed before his death. Each page told a story, a pattern of manipulation buried under polished paperwork. Signatures shifted slightly. Clauses appeared in newer versions of old documents. The legal trail was too perfect, too clean. Then Luca burst in one afternoon with a name. "Eli, I found someone who might help. She used to handle Matteo's audits, before Vince bought her silence. Her name was Nadia Voss, a financial auditor with a reputation for brilliance and a past she no longer spoke about. When Eli met her at a quiet cafe, she wore dark glasses and carried a single flash drive. Her voice was calm, but laced with guilt. 'I know what Caravelli is doing,' she said. 'He's rerouting foundation assets through shell subsidiaries under Matteo's old business ID, using forged consent forms.' Eli leaned forward. 'Can you prove it?' Her lips curved faintly. 'I already did. I just never had the courage to release it.' The next few days became a quiet war fought with spreadsheets and signatures. Nadia guided Eli through layers of encrypted files, tracing funds that disappeared into fake trusts, only to reappear as donations to Caravelli-linked charities. Each discovery felt like pulling a thread from a tapestry until the entire picture began to unravel. As the evidence mounted, so did the risk. They worked late nights in Matteo's old office, surrounded by folders and flickering monitors. Luca served as lookout, intercepting suspicious visitors and fake auditors sent by Vince's men. Finally, Nadia decrypted one final folder. Her hands trembled as the screen filled with scanned contracts, each bearing forged versions of Matteo's signature, legally transferring ownership of his companies posthumously. Eli's heart pounded. He was planning this even before Matteo died. Nadia nodded. Vince never just wins, he erases. They organized everything, files, recordings, financial trails, into a digital dossier. It was enough to bring Vince's empire to a halt, if they could survive long enough to submit it. That night, as they finished backing up the final copy, Nadia sat quietly, staring at the computer screen. "Eli," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you before this goes any further." Eli looked up. "What is it?" Her eyes glistened. "I'm not just helping you because I knew Matteo. I'm helping you because I helped Vince." Eli froze. "I built the system he's using against you," Nadia confessed, voice trembling. "The fake trusts, the hidden trails, they were my designs. I thought it was just routine auditing, but I should have known. This," she gestured toward the evidence, "this is my redemption." Eli stared at her, caught between anger and understanding. "Then make it count." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I will, but if Vince finds out I switched sides, he won't use courts next time." Eli stood, his resolve unshaken. "Then we make sure the truth reaches the light before he does." As they prepared to send the encrypted files to a trusted lawyer, Nadia's laptop flickered. A message appeared on the screen, unsigned but unmistakable. "Nice try, Nadia. You always were predictable." And then, the hard drive began erasing itself. The laptop screen went black. Files vanished line by line, replaced by one message that pulsed like a heartbeat. Predictable. Nadia stared at it, her face pale under the glow of the emergency light. "He knew exactly where we were," she whispered. "The network we used, it's been compromised." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick with failure. Then Eli stood, calm but firm. "We still have each other. That's something he can't erase." Nadia shook her head. "You should hate me for what I caused." Eli met her gaze. "Hating you doesn't fix anything. But forgiveness might." It was the simplest thing he could have said, but it changed everything. The tension in Nadia's eyes softened. "You're too good for this world, Eli Romano," she murmured. "That's why it needs you." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to recover fragments of the erased data. Some files were gone forever, but others survived in encrypted email backups and paper copies Matteo had stored in hidden safes. With Luca's help, they pieced together enough evidence to prove a pattern of systematic fraud, Caravelli's silent empire of deception. But sending it to the authorities would be too slow. Vince's influence stretched deep. Judges, lawyers, even regulators. So Eli suggested something different. "We take it to the one power he can't fully control, the public." Through an anonymous whistleblower account, they sent the evidence to a circle of independent journalists known for their integrity. The package included digital trails, testimony from former employees, and a confession note from one of Vince's ghost accountants. For a moment, it felt like victory. The first article went live within hours. Leaked documents suggest corporate fraud in Caravelli Holdings. It spread quickly, shared by thousands, reigniting public sympathy for Eli and the Foundation. Then, just as the momentum built, the story twisted. By the following morning, mainstream headlines screamed a different narrative. Foundation, insider leaks classified files. Orphan Boy betrays his own donors. Sources claim Eli Romano staged his own scandal. News anchors, bloggers, and social media accounts all carried the same tone. Controlled outrage, perfectly timed. Vince's media machine had turned truth into treachery. Luca slammed his phone down. "He flipped the narrative overnight. They're calling you a traitor to Matteo's memory." Eli scrolled through the comments in silence. Accusations, mockery, disappointment from people he'd inspired. But his voice, when he finally spoke, was steady. "Then we go deeper. We find what even Vince can't spin." Nadia nodded slowly. "There's still one place we haven't looked. Matteo's private foundation vault. It's off record, and only two people ever had access, Matteo and Vince." Eli's eyes sharpened. "Then that's where the truth sleeps." As they packed to leave, a news alert flashed across Nadia's screen. A press release from Caravelli Holdings. Vince Caravelli to host live press conference addressing recent accusations and unveiling shocking revelations about the Romano Foundation. Luca looked up in alarm. "He's not just defending himself, he's coming for you, Liv, tonight." By sunrise, every screen in the city flashed Eli Romano's face. The once celebrated boy who wouldn't beg was now painted as the manipulative orphan who betrayed his benefactor's legacy. By noon, the city's ethics committee announced an emergency hearing. The DeLuca Foundation's accounts were frozen, all ongoing projects suspended. Even the orphanage gates stood locked, a silent punishment for crimes he hadn't committed. Eli arrived at the courthouse surrounded by reporters. The flash of cameras felt harsher than ever, each question like a blade. "Did you falsify evidence? Are you admitting to using Matteo's legacy for personal gain?" He kept his head low and whispered to Luca beside him. "Let them say what they want. Truth isn't decided by volume." Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere was suffocating. The committee members sat behind a long mahogany table, stern-faced and silent. Vince Caravelli wasn't there. He didn't need to be. His influence filled the room like perfume. Chairwoman Alina Drexler, a woman known for her composure, began the proceedings. Mr. Romano, you stand accused of fabricating evidence, misappropriating charitable funds, and tarnishing the DeLuca Foundation's reputation. What do you have to say for yourself? Eli rose slowly. I may be young, and I may not understand all the laws written on paper, but I do understand one law that never changes, the law of conscience. I didn't steal. I didn't lie. And if truth takes longer to win than deception, I'll still wait for it. The audience murmured. His voice was steady, but the weight of defeat lingered in his eyes. He'd already lost most of what mattered, or so he thought. Then, just as the session adjourned for deliberation, a court clerk rushed in with a stack of envelopes. Madam Chair, he said breathlessly, these just arrived, addressed to the committee. Hundreds of letters bound together by colored ribbons. The clerk placed them on the table, one after another. Alina frowned. What are these? They're from the public, he replied. From the orphanage, the volunteers, and schools, hospitals, even small businesses. They all wanted to testify about Mr. Romano's work. One by one, the committee members began reading. A baker wrote about how Eli helped rebuild her shop after a fire. A student thanked him for funding her education anonymously. A doctor recalled how Eli once spent nights volunteering during an emergency shortage. Each letter was a quiet candle in a storm of lies. The murmurs turned into applause from the audience gallery. Even reporters who once doubted him began recording the testimonies live. The courtroom, once cold and hostile, now glowed with something rare, faith. Vince's shadow still loomed, but for the first time it trembled. Chairwoman Alina cleared her throat, visibly moved. Given these unexpected developments and the volume of new material, the committee will postpone its ruling until a full review can be conducted. Eli exhaled shakily, emotion flickering across his usually composed face. For the first time in weeks, hope returned. Fragile but real. As they stepped outside, Luca clapped him on the shoulder. You did it, Eli. The truth is starting to breathe again. Eli smiled faintly. No, they did it. All of them. That's what honesty does. It multiplies when everything else falls apart. But his moment of peace didn't last. Nadia came running toward them, face pale, phone in hand. Eli, she gasped. You need to see this. On her screen was a breaking news headline. New evidence emerges in the Romano case. Source, Caravelli Legal Division. Luca frowned. He's moving again. Whatever Vince has. It's coming straight for the final verdict. Night had fallen over the city, but Eli hadn't slept. The chaos of the hearing still echoed in his mind. The applause, the postponed verdict, and that final chilling headline, New evidence emerges in the Romano case. He sat by the dim light of Matteo's old desk lamp, flipping through folders scattered across the mahogany surface. The Foundation's ledgers, records, and documents lay open like a battlefield of ink and paper. Somewhere in the maze of Matteo's past, there had to be something that proved his intentions were pure. Nadia paced behind him, her expression strained. We're running out of time, she murmured. Vince's legal division will submit their evidence by morning. Once that happens, the committee could move for a full dissolution. Eli closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. Then we need something stronger. Truth that can't be faked. She hesitated, then reached into her satchel and pulled out an old sealed envelope. Matteo once told me about a trust ledger, not financial, but legal. He called it his ledger of hope. He said if anything ever went wrong, it would protect everything he built. Eli's eyes widened. Where is it? Nadia swallowed. That's the problem. I only know it exists. The last place I saw Matteo working before he died was the old vineyard estate outside the city, the one no one's touched in years. Eli stood immediately, resolve hardening in his chest. Then that's where I'll go. Luca, who had been silently scrolling through his phone nearby, looked up. You sure about this? Vince's men have eyes everywhere. If you move tonight, they'll know. Eli met his gaze calmly. Then let them know. I'm not hiding anymore. The next morning, as dawn broke over the outskirts of the city, Eli arrived at the abandoned vineyard. Vines twisted around rusted gates, and the mansion loomed like a ghost of its former self. Inside, dust blanketed every surface. He searched tirelessly, opening drawers, shifting portraits, prying loose floorboards. Hours passed before he noticed something odd, a brass keyhole hidden behind Matteo's framed photograph. He inserted a rusted key Nadia had found in an old folder. The wall panel clicked open, revealing a small safe. Inside lay a thick, leather-bound book, embossed with Matteo's initials. The Ledger of Hope. Eli flipped through the pages, not numbers, but names, hundreds of them. People Matteo had helped, partnerships formalized into a trust structure designed to fund the foundation indefinitely. Legal signatures, notarized and sealed. It wasn't just proof of honesty. It was the weapon Vince feared most. Nadia gasped. This could clear your name, Eli. It shows the foundation's assets belong to the people, not the Caravelli estate. For the first time in weeks, Eli smiled genuinely. Then Matteo never died in vain. As they left the vineyard, the air felt lighter. The sun cut through the fog, and for a brief moment, hope returned. Fragile but real. But their car stopped abruptly on the road back. A black limousine blocked their path. From the tinted window, Vince Caravelli stepped out, immaculate as ever, his presence commanding the silence around him. He walked toward Eli slowly, his smile razor-thin. "You've been busy," Vince said, digging in the dirt for ghosts and promises. Eli stood tall. "I found the truth. That's all I need." Vince chuckled darkly. "Truth?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Truth doesn't pay debts or win trials. But I'm generous, Romano. Hand over that ledger, walk away quietly, and I'll make sure you live comfortably. Refuse." His tone turned to steel. "And you'll watch everything Matteo built turn to ashes." The wind rustled between them, carrying the weight of the ultimatum. Eli's grip tightened around the ledger. He met Vince's gaze without blinking. "Then I guess you'll have to start the fire yourself." Vince's expression froze for a beat, then softened into a sinister smile. "So be it." He turned and entered the car. The limo drove away, leaving only the whisper of its tires against the gravel, and the promise of a war about to begin. Nadia exhaled shakily. "Eli, he's going to strike back." Eli looked toward the horizon, eyes burning with resolve. "Then let him. The ledger will speak louder than his lies." The next morning dawned gray and restless, as if the city itself sensed what was coming. Eli sat at his desk, the Ledger of Hope open before him, its pages glowing faintly under the early light. Every line, every signature, was proof that Matteo had built something pure, something meant to outlive corruption. Yet without the legal trust papers to accompany it, the ledger was powerless. Nadia had spent the entire night cross-referencing the entries, but the final validation, the sealed trust documents, were still missing. Luca entered, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I've gone through every archive in Matteo's name. No record of a trust vault. It's like it never existed." Eli frowned, running his fingers over a faint ink mark on one of the ledger's last pages. It wasn't a name, it was a drawing. A tiny symbol shaped like a child's handprint, next to a scrawled word, Casa di Luce. Nadia's eyes widened. The orphanage, that's what he called it before it was renamed the Hope Shelter. Eli's breath caught. Matteo's first orphanage, the one he founded before he had money. Before everything. That evening, as rain began to drizzle again, they drove to the outskirts where the Casa di Luce stood, abandoned for over a decade. The wooden sign hung crooked, vines swallowing its name. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. They searched room after room until they reached the basement door, half hidden behind fallen shelves. The hinges groaned as Eli pushed it open. A rush of cold air met them, carrying the faint scent of old paper and forgotten dreams. He descended carefully, flashlight in hand. At the far wall, beneath layers of plaster, something glimmered. A steel vault embedded into the foundation itself. The initials MDL were engraved faintly at the top. "This is it," Nadia whispered, her voice trembling. Eli brushed away the grime and inserted the key Matteo had once given him, the same key that had opened the vineyard safe. The lock clicked, heavy and final. Inside the vault were dozens of files, their seals intact and notarized. He opened the first one. Matteo DeLuca Trust, for the perpetual care and expansion of orphan shelters under community ownership. The words blurred for a moment as Eli's throat tightened. This wasn't about power, he murmured. It was about people. He turned to Nadia. "We have to bring this to the ethics committee before Vince moves." But Nadia's phone buzzed before she could answer. She glanced at the screen, and her expression turned pale. "It's already started," she said quietly, showing him the news alert. Caravelli Holdings files injunction against alleged fraudulent trust activation, claims forgery by former orphan Eli Romano. Eli stared at the headline. The room felt colder suddenly, the walls closing in. He's trying to block it legally before it even sees daylight. Luca cursed softly. "He's painting you as a thief using Matteo's name to take control. It's everywhere, news, social feeds, even donation platforms." Eli closed the vault carefully and straightened. "Then we do what Matteo would have done. We face it head on." Nadia frowned. "How?" "He's frozen all the accounts. The Foundation's board won't meet until the injunction is cleared. He's cornered us." Eli's gaze shifted back to the rows of documents behind him. "Not if we bring the truth to the public first. These papers are more than legal proof. They're Matteo's voice. If the world hears it, Vince's lies won't stand." As they sealed the vault copies and packed them securely, thunder cracked above. The storm was gathering, both outside and in their lives. Eli paused at the orphanage door, looking back at the place that had once been filled with laughter. "He hid hope where it began," he said softly. "Now we'll let it shine again." But as they reached the car, a courier approached, drenched and breathless, holding an envelope marked "Urgent Court Order." Eli opened it, and his heart sank. The document was official. All trust materials were to be surrendered to Caravelli Holdings pending investigation. Failure to comply could result in criminal charges. For the first time, Nadia looked frightened. "Eli, if we hand them over, they'll disappear. But if we don't..." Eli folded the order calmly, eyes set with quiet defiance. "Then we'll protect them, even if it costs us everything." Lightning flashed through the rain as they drove off, the sealed trust box between them. The last spark of hope against a rising storm of deception. Vince watches the rain from his penthouse window, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he receives a message. They found the vault. He replies coldly, "Good. Now make sure they never reach the court." The courthouse stood tall and cold, its marble halls echoing with murmurs of curiosity and judgment. Cameras flashed outside as reporters called Eli's name, their questions cutting through the rain-soaked morning air. "Did you forge Matteo DeLuca's trust? Are you really using orphan donations to cover debts? Is the ledger just another con?" Eli said nothing. He adjusted his suit, plain, slightly oversized, and walked forward with quiet dignity. Behind him, Nadia and Luca followed, carrying the sealed box of trust documents like sacred relics. Inside, the courtroom brimmed with tension. On one side sat Vince Caravelli, polished as ever, flanked by his team of high-powered attorneys. His smirk was small, confident, the smile of a man who believed the world system would always protect him. On the other side, Eli stood alone at the defendant's table, his expression calm but resolute. This was not about money anymore. It was about truth. and the promise Matteo had made to those who believed in compassion over control. The presiding judge, a stern woman with silver-rimmed glasses, adjusted her files. Court is now in session. Case 0871, Caravelli Holdings versus the Matteo DeLuca Foundation Trust. Mr. Romano, you are accused of unlawfully attempting to activate a forged trust in violation of inheritance and property law. How do you plead? Eli's voice was steady. Not guilty, Your Honor, and not silent. Gasps rippled through the room. Vince's lawyer rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of legal ownership. Mr. Romano was an orphan given temporary access to Mr. DeLuca's estate. The documents he claims as a trust are unverified, a fabrication born of misplaced idealism. Eli opened the ledger slowly. With respect, Your Honor, this isn't idealism, it's legacy. He stepped forward, holding up a page. These are records of every life Matteo touched, the men and women he lifted from poverty, the children whose education he funded, the communities he rebuilt after the storms. His foundation wasn't about profit. It was about people. Vince leaned back, chuckling softly. Noble words, but kindness doesn't pay debts, boy. Business runs on numbers, not sentiment. Eli met his gaze evenly. You're wrong. Kindness creates value, and it just doesn't always wear a price tag. He turned to the judge. Matteo's investments weren't in companies. They were in futures, people who now run thriving businesses, hospitals, and schools because of him. I've gathered statements, financial ledgers, and witness accounts proving the trust's dividends were real, even if the profit wasn't measured in cash. Nadia stood and presented folders to the court clerk. Each contained letters and financial statements, proof that Matteo's debts had transformed into self-sustaining community projects. As the judge examined them, murmurs swept the room. One of the orphans, now grown and successful, stepped forward as a witness, voice trembling with emotion. Matteo DeLuca didn't owe us money, he said. He gave us hope, and it multiplied. That's the kind of wealth this trust protects. For the first time, Vince's composure cracked slightly. He whispered something to his attorney, who began flipping through papers in a panic. The judge looked up after a long silence. Mr. Caravelli, do you contest these verified documents and testimonies? Vince forced a smile. Your Honor, sentimentality does not equate to solvency. Unless Mr. Romano can prove that these supposed investments generated liquid assets, the trust cannot legally be activated. The room fell silent. Eli's confidence wavered for the first time. Liquidation proof, actual cash flow, was the one thing Matteo's documents lacked. The trust had value in human impact, not currency. The judge sighed. Then this court will withhold its verdict until clear evidence of liquidation is produced. Mr. Romano, you have 72 hours to present proof that the trust's holdings can cover its outstanding debts. A heavy gavel strike echoed through the hall. Court is adjourned. Reporters swarmed the exit. Nadia's voice was barely a whisper as they pushed through the crowd. Eli, how are we going to show proof of money that doesn't exist? Eli looked back toward the empty courtroom, Matteo's words echoing in his mind. Trust is not about wealth. It's about what you leave behind. He exhaled slowly. Maybe the proof isn't in numbers. Maybe it's in the people who became the proof. As they stepped outside into the sunlight breaking through clouds, Vince watched from a black car across the street, eyes cold. 72 hours, he murmured. Let's make sure he has nothing left to show. That night, Luca bursts into Eli's office, pale and breathless. Eli, the orphan shelter's bank accounts just went dark, every last one. The foundation's offices were silent except for the hum of the computers still running on backup power. Every digital screen that once displayed account balances now glowed with the same grim message. Access restricted. Funds unavailable. Eli stared at the monitors, disbelief hardening into quiet resolve. He had 72 hours to prove Matteo's trust was solvent. Now, even the proof he had was gone. Nadia stood behind him, her voice trembling. All the orphanage accounts. Emptied overnight. The money didn't disappear by accident, Eli. Someone redirected it. Luca slammed a fist on the table. This isn't Vince. His lawyers couldn't touch charitable reserves without a warrant. Someone inside helped him. Eli turned slowly toward them. Someone Matteo trusted. That afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the office windows, Nadia sifted through old accounting archives, tracing digital fingerprints buried beneath years of encrypted data. Her eyes suddenly widened. Eli, I found something. A signature authorization from 6 years ago. It's from Matteo's co-founder, Enzo Morelli. Eli's heart sank. Enzo, Matteo's oldest friend, his right hand during the foundation's creation. If anyone could move those funds quietly, it was him. Luca frowned. He vanished after Matteo's death. Rumor was, he had disagreements about the trust's direction. Looks like he didn't just walk away, or he walked off with the books. Eli exhaled slowly. Then we find him. That evening, Eli traveled alone to a quiet seaside town outside the city. He found Enzo living in a modest house near the docks. Gray hair, unshaven, eyes weary but sharp. The air smelled of salt and regret. Matteo's boy, Enzo said as he opened the door. I knew you'd come eventually. Eli nodded. You knew Matteo better than anyone. So why did you betray him? Enzo didn't deny it. He poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the table. Matteo dreamed too big. He thought compassion could outrun debt. When the foundation started collapsing, I moved the remaining funds to protect them from being seized. But after Matteo died, Vince cornered me. I signed the accounts over under threat. I didn't steal them. I surrendered them. Eli sat across from him, calm but firm. Then help me fix it. You can still make it right. Enzo's gaze dropped to his trembling hands. You don't understand. If I speak, they'll destroy me. Eli's voice softened. I'm not asking for revenge, Enzo. I'm asking for truth. Matteo believed in people, even when they failed him. You were his friend. Don't let fear bury his legacy. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking. Then Enzo sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging. You sound just like him. He walked to an old cabinet and pulled out a sealed folder covered in dust. I kept this. The original transaction documents Vince forced me to sign. It proves he used the trust's money to buy out Matteo's smaller charities. I never thought I'd hand it over. Eli took the folder gently. You just did. Enzo looked up, eyes glistening. What will you do with it? Tell the truth, Eli said simply. Not just for the court. For Matteo. As Eli turned to leave, Enzo stopped him. Eli, I've done things I can't undo. But if you're really carrying Matteo's dream, don't let numbers define it. Remember, the foundation was never about money, it was about meaning. Eli smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure that meaning survives. He left the small house as the last light faded from the sky. In his hands was more than evidence. It was redemption wrapped in paper and ink. That night, back at the office, Nadia unfolded the documents in disbelief. Eli, this is everything. Proof that Vince's entire takeover was built on false liquidation. This could clear you completely. Eli nodded, but his eyes lingered on Enzo's trembling signature at the bottom of the confession. Mercy, he murmured, was Matteo's strongest weapon. The next morning, Eli prepared to deliver the documents to the court, but before he could leave, Luca burst into the room, his face pale. Eli, something's wrong. The files Enzo gave us, they're being leaked online. Every account, every transaction, someone's releasing them before we can control the narrative. Eli's eyes widened. That's impossible. Only we. Then he froze. The office door creaked open. A courier stood there, holding a small sealed envelope with a familiar emblem. Caravelli Holdings. Eli took it and opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. "You're playing a dangerous game, Romano. Let's see if mercy still saves you when the truth turns against you." He looked up, jaw tightening as thunder rolled in the distance. Nadia whispered, "Eli, Vince leaked the truth before you could use it." Eli's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Then we'll show the world the difference between truth used for fear and truth used for freedom." Morning light poured through the high windows of the Foundation office, a light Eli hadn't seen in months. For the first time since Matteo's death, the air inside felt alive again. After weeks of trial, betrayal, and endless storms, the Foundation's trust had been legally reinstated. The court's ruling was clear. Matteo DeLuca's charitable assets rightfully belonged to the public good, not to Caravelli Holdings. The victory had come quietly at dawn, through an email stamped with the judge's final seal. Nadia read it twice before whispering, "You did it, Eli, it's over." But Eli didn't smile. He looked out the window at the city skyline. "No," he said softly, "it's only beginning." That afternoon, he stood before cameras for the first time since the scandal broke. Reporters crowded the courtyard of the newly restored headquarters, their lenses fixed on him. Gone was the timid orphan they once doubted. Before them stood a young man forged in struggle, calm yet commanding. Eli stepped to the podium, holding Matteo's old ledger in one hand and a simple folder in the other. "This foundation began with a promise," he began. "A promise that power should serve people, not the other way around. Matteo DeLuca believed debts could be paid with compassion, not by destroying others, but by lifting them. That's what we stand for." He opened the folder and revealed the new emblem, a rising sun encircled by hands. "Today we begin again under a new name, the Romano Promise Fund. This isn't just a charity, it's a movement, one built on trust, transparency, and hope." A hush swept the crowd as he continued, his voice steady but emotional. "We've all seen how greed can twist good intentions, but we've also seen what honesty can rebuild. Debts can be paid without hate, wounds can heal without revenge, and the legacy of kindness will always outlive corruption." Nadia stood in the crowd, tears glimmering. Luca filmed the speech live, and within hours the clip spread across social media like wildfire. Hashtags began trending. Romano Promise, Hope Without Hate, Matteo Lives On. Messages poured in from around the world, donations, volunteers, survivors of hardship sharing how compassion had changed their lives. Orphans rebuilt the shelters that once closed. Small businesses reopened with community support. The city that had turned against Eli now embraced him as a symbol of moral courage. By sunset, every major network carried his story. News anchors called it the rebirth of integrity. But not everyone was celebrating. High above the city, in his penthouse office, Vince Caravelli watched the broadcast in silence. The once confident mogul now looked gaunt, shadows beneath his eyes. His phone vibrated nonstop, messages from panicked investors, headlines reporting plummeting stocks, board members resigning. "Your holdings are collapsing," his assistant whispered. "The government has reopened every file tied to Matteo's assets. The press wants your statement." Vince said nothing. His gaze lingered on the television screen where Eli's words echoed again. "Debts can be paid without hate." He turned the TV off, staring into the dark reflection of the glass wall. "He took everything," he muttered, though somewhere deep inside, even he wasn't sure if he meant assets or peace. Back at the Romano Promise headquarters, the team gathered around a modest dinner table, a celebration meal of simple pasta and laughter. For the first time in months, they could breathe. Nadia raised a glass of sparkling cider. To Matteo, and to the boy who refused to bend. Eli smiled. To everyone who believed when it didn't make sense to believe. As they toasted, the lights flickered briefly. A small, almost unnoticeable glitch. Luca frowned, checking his tablet. "That's odd." The donation servers just got a strange data ping from an unlisted IP. Nadia tilted her head. What does that mean? He hesitated. I'm not sure, but it's coming from Caravelli's corporate network. Eli's smile faded slightly. Then maybe Vince isn't done yet. Outside, the city skyline shimmered with renewed hope, but far away, a new shadow was beginning to stir. Vince stared at his darkened screen, a single message flashing on his laptop. You can still win this, if you're willing to burn it all. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Then he whispered, then let it burn. The following week, the city's skyline was draped in storm clouds, fitting perhaps for the storm about to break over Vince Caravelli. At dawn, unmarked cars lined the street outside his glass tower. The once unshakable tycoon stood by his window, staring down as federal auditors and investigators filed through the revolving doors of Caravelli Holdings. For years he had controlled ministers, banks, and media. Now, they all stood on the opposite side of the table. His assistant entered quietly. They've frozen your accounts, sir. The government wants access to your offshore ledgers. The media's calling it the reckoning of greed. Vince said nothing. He only reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single silver cufflink, Matteo's gift long ago, back when both men believed power could change the world for the better. His jaw clenched. Somewhere between ambition and revenge, he had lost everything that mattered. By mid-afternoon, the investigators had stripped his office bare of files and devices. When they left, the silence was unbearable. Vince poured himself a drink, but his hand trembled. On the wall-mounted TV, the headline rolled again and again. Caravelli faces criminal probe. Assets seized pending trial. That evening, as the sun sank behind the city, a soft knock echoed through the nearly empty office. Vince didn't answer at first, but the door opened anyway, and there stood Eli Romano. For a moment, neither spoke. The air carried tension, memory, and something neither could name. Vince scoffed quietly. You came to gloat? Eli shook his head. No, to thank you. Vince frowned. Thank me? For what? Destroying your life? For showing me what fear does, Eli replied softly. He stepped closer, his eyes steady. Fear never builds anything, Vince. It only breaks. I used to think power meant control, but Matteo and even you taught me otherwise. Power isn't about who kneels. It's about who stands back up without hatred. Vince's fingers tightened around the glass. You think that makes you better? No, Eli said simply. It just means I finally understand what Matteo was trying to build, and I'm done fighting shadows. He turned toward the door. Goodbye, Vince. I hope you find peace, even if it's too late for everything else. The door closed quietly behind him, leaving Vince alone with the echo of words he couldn't forget. For the first time, silence didn't feel like victory. It felt like judgment. Outside, Eli stepped into the cool night. Cameras flashed in the distance, but he ignored them. He didn't crave headlines anymore. He only craved purpose. As he walked past the crowd, a small boy selling newspapers recognized him. Mr. Eli, they said your foundation's back, the boy called. Eli smiled faintly. It's not mine, he said. It's everyone's. He dropped a few bills into the boy's hand, more than enough for a week's meals, and continued down the street as lights flickered back to life across the district. Hours later, back at the Romano Promise office, Nadia was sorting through a stack of donation pledges when a courier arrived with a sealed envelope. No sender, no address, just Eli's name, handwritten in looping cursive. She handed it to him cautiously. This came for you. Eli opened it. Inside was a single check and a note. The amount was staggering, enough to triple the foundation's operations worldwide. Nadia gasped. Who would give that much? Eli turned the note over. At the bottom, written in graceful ink, were 4 words that made his breath hitch. An old friend. For a long moment he said nothing. The city outside glowed faintly, the lights shimmering against the rain. Finally he whispered, "Old friend? Or old ghost?" Nadia looked at him curiously. "Do you think it's Matteo's estate?" Eli shook his head slowly. "No, this handwriting, it's not his." He looked again at the signature, elegant, deliberate, and hauntingly familiar. Somewhere, miles away, a figure watched a news broadcast showing Eli's latest speech, a faint smile crossing their lips before the screen faded to black. The mysterious donor's identity remains hidden, but in the shadows, a new player seems to have entered the board. The dawn that followed was quiet, but alive with promise. Months had passed since Vince's fall, and under Eli Romano's leadership, the Romano Promise Fund blossomed beyond anyone's imagination. What began as a small, struggling orphan shelter had grown into a global movement. Across cities and continents, new programs for education, rehabilitation, and community reform sprang up, not funded by greed or manipulation, but by compassion. Each new branch bore Matteo DeLuca's old emblem, an olive branch shaped like a flame, a symbol of peace born from struggle. Eli's days blurred between meetings, classrooms, and late-night correspondence. Yet, despite the chaos, he never lost sight of why he began: to repay kindness with integrity. Nadia Voss had become his closest advisor. Where once she lived with guilt, now she carried conviction. Together, they reshaped the Foundation's mission. Every debt repaid through change, not chains. Luca Ferro, ever loyal, managed the growing network of programs, ensuring that every orphanage ran on transparency and care. During one televised conference in Geneva, Eli delivered a speech that caught the world's attention. "We measure power not by what we own, but by how quickly we forgive, because forgiveness plants the only seeds that grow into something greater than fear." The audience rose in applause. But in the midst of celebration, Eli felt something unspoken stirring inside him. Later that evening, back in his modest office, Nadia handed him an envelope, aged, yellowed, and sealed with wax. It arrived with the last archive shipment from Matteo's estate, she explained softly. Eli turned it over, recognizing Matteo's distinctive handwriting. His pulse quickened as he broke the seal. Inside lay a single folded letter and a photograph, a younger Matteo standing beside an unfamiliar man at a construction site. Behind them, a banner read, "DeLuca Housing for Every Child." Eli unfolded the letter, Matteo's voice echoing through every word. "Eli, if this reaches you, it means you've done what I couldn't, turned debts into destiny. Remember, true power is not wealth nor even wisdom. It is the ability to forgive faster than others can destroy. The world will test you again, as it tested me. When it does, remember, forgiveness is not weakness, it's rebirth." Eli sat in silence for a long while, staring at the letter. Outside, rain tapped against the window, the same rhythm from the night he'd first met Matteo in the alley. Nadia approached gently. "What did he say?" Eli smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "That forgiveness is the only power that lasts." But as he tucked the letter away, his gaze lingered on the photograph. The man beside Matteo, the one he didn't recognize, wore a distinctive silver ring carved with an emblem of an eye and flame. Something about it stirred his memory. Luca entered just then, carrying fresh documents. "Eli, there's something odd. A new donor just pledged funding for all our expansion programs in South America. Their symbol, it's the same one from this photo." Eli's heart skipped a beat. He turned the photo again, the eye and flame glimmering faintly under the desk lamp. "Whoever this man was," Eli murmured, "Matteo trusted him once." Nadia exchanged a wary glance with Luca, and now he's back. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline, a reminder that even seeds of legacy can cast long shadows. Eli realizes Matteo's final lesson may not just be about forgiveness, but about facing a buried chapter of the Don's past that is quietly resurfacing through the mysterious new donor. The morning air carried the scent of fresh paint and blooming jasmine. The old orphanage, once dim, crumbling, and nearly forgotten, now gleamed under a golden sunrise. Its courtyard was alive with laughter, bright murals, and children chasing paper kites. The plaque by the gate read, "DeLuca Romano Home for Hope." Cameras and guests filled the garden for the grand reopening. World leaders, philanthropists, and the very people Eli once helped stood side by side, their faces glowing with anticipation. Yet amid the grandeur, Eli stood humbly at the edge of the stage, fingertips brushing against the folded letter in his pocket, Matteo's final words. He glanced toward Luca, who gave him a reassuring nod. Nadia stood beside the press table, smiling proudly, her once cautious eyes now full of peace. When Eli stepped to the microphone, the crowd quieted. His voice was steady, calm, carrying the weight of every hardship and the light of every choice that had led him here. "When I first came to this place," when he began, "I was just a boy trying to make enough to keep the rain from leaking through the roof. I never imagined I'd one day be standing here reopening it, not with money but with meaning." The audience leaned in. "This home," Eli continued, "isn't just for orphans. It's for every soul that's ever felt unseen, every heart that's been told it wasn't enough. Don Matteo taught me something I'll never forget. Debts aren't always measured in numbers. Some are measured in kindness, and those are the only ones worth paying forever." Applause rippled through the courtyard. Even the youngest children clapped without fully understanding. They could feel it. Eli raised his hand, gesturing toward a bronze statue unveiled beside the garden fountain. Matteo DeLuca, not in a suit, but in rolled sleeves, helping a child plant a sapling. Beneath it a small inscription read, "To those who give without expecting return, your kindness lives on." As the ceremony continued, reporters gathered, their questions blending into a hum. One leaned forward and asked, "Mr. Romano, after everything you've endured, betrayal, scandal, loss, what kept you going?" Eli smiled, the kind that carried both gratitude and grace. "Hope," he said simply. "Because even when the world takes everything, hope asks for one more try." The cameras caught his smile as sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the courtyard. Children's laughter rose again, pure, unguarded, free. Nadia whispered beside him, "He'd be proud of you, you know." Eli turned to her, eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. "He didn't just save me that night," he said softly. "He gave me a reason to keep saving others." As music swelled and the kites drifted higher into the sky, the camera panned slowly across the courtyard, over Matteo's statue, over the faces of joyful children, and finally over Eli standing beneath the new banner. Kindness outlives power. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every storm finally finding its peace. And as the final shot faded into the golden horizon, Eli's voice echoed like a gentle vow. "A debt of kindness is the only one worth paying forever." Fade out.